Hey everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski here, taking a look at one of two graded stakes on Saturday at Saratoga. This is race 10, the grade 3 Caress Stakes, going 5.5 furlongs on the turf course for the fillies and mares. Craig, we've got a field of 10 signed on, including last year's winner of this race, the number 1 Caravel. But last year, I think she just beat a field of 5 in this spot. It's a much tougher, deeper edition of the Caress this year.
Yeah, it certainly is. We have a lot of not newly turned anymore since we're into July, but a lot of 4-year-olds who are still improving, especially as turf horses, and just a much more interesting event, I think. And I think it's a race where you can go in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, Caravel was the winner of the Intercontinental Stakes last time out. We'll talk a bit more about that race in just a little, but a lot of horses are coming out of that race in here. About Time, the number 4, I pegged her as the second choice on the morning line. A horse that's been pretty successful since she started sprinting on turf for trainer Cherie DeVoe. She is one of those up-and-coming 4-year-olds that has plenty of upside, so we'll see if they can overtake Caravel, who has to be considered the horse to beat coming in based on her exploits and class lines in these turf sprints. Before we get to the major contenders, Craig, let's take a look at the Timeform US Pace Projector for this race. Interesting to see how they shake out on the front end. Would not be a surprise, though, if the number 6 Robin Sparkles winds up on the lead.
No, she's pretty much always on the lead, and I do wonder how much trouble she would cause for our morning line favorite, Caravel. I think that's the most interesting part of the Pace Projector.
Yeah, because Caravel did win in gate-to-wire fashion last time out. I think she's unlikely to get that trip here with Robin Sparkles in the race. She just possesses more natural speed. Also interested to see what we get from the number 10, Fuete, if she runs in this race. She has shown a lot of early speed on the dirt. This will be her turf debut. So if she handles the turf, I guess she's a horse that can be forwardly placed. But these kinds are often wild cards trying to transfer that dirt speed to the turf. I was speaking of that Intercontinental towards the top of our preview. Let's take a look at the stretch run of that race. And we've got 5 horses that competed in this Intercontinental coming back in the Caress. We're going to highlight them all here. That is Caravel, that gray filly on the lead. Star Divine in behind with Lady Edith. On the outside, you've got Miss J Mckay. And at the back of the pack, that's Toby's Heart trying to pass them in the stretch. Craig, there were a lot of trips in this race. Caravel, though, didn't have any trouble. She saved ground on the front end and led the field gate to wire.
Yeah, she's the one who didn't have a trip, I would say. There were some other decent trips, a couple not so good trips. I thought this was a replay we had to show because half the field is coming from this race. So for me, as we're going to get into these horses, Caravel is certainly a horse who can win here. We showed that she's went wire to wire in her last 2 wins, including one on synthetic. If you scroll back farther in her PPs, which you can do in Timeform US, you can look at their whole lifetime past performances. You can see she can come from off the pace to win. She did it in this race last year when she beat Robin Sparkles. But drawn inside, that could be a little tougher to do, and she might find herself in traffic. So she's one, while I certainly think she can win, I don't think she offers a lot of value.
Yeah, I had those same concerns about Caravel. She's gotten such good trips when she's been successful. I think Tyler's going to have to try to work out something from the inside post here. That's often not the place to be in these turf sprints at Saratoga, but she does have the tactical speed to potentially get herself out of trouble. We'll see what they decide to do from that rail draw with her. The horse that was second in the Intercontinental to Caravel was Star Divine. She is one of those 4-year-olds that I think does still have some upside, just making the 7th start of her career. Had to briefly pause in traffic behind Caravel last time, but Craig, I thought she had a lot more go right than wrong in that trip.
Yeah, I think she had a good trip. Obviously, a little traffic trouble, but that's not a big deal when you're saving ground like she was. What I do like about her is the jump she showed from her 3-year-old to her 4-year-old season. You could see it in the speed figure. She backed it up a little bit last time with it, just a slight regression. I don't even consider that regressing. It's basically the same speed figure, maybe the trip. Maybe she bounced just a little bit coming off of that second start off that long layoff. But I think she's certainly a contender. She draws well in here. So a similar trip, she's going to be dangerous.
And she was a winner over this course and distance in the Galway Stakes last year when she was a 3-year-old. Another horse who won a 5.5 furlong turf sprint stakes win at Saratoga is the number 5, Toby's Heart, who we'll look at next. And she's one of the ones who did not get an ideal trip last time in the Intercontinental, Craig. We didn't show the start of that race, but she got bumped and squeezed back pretty badly, wound up a little farther back than I think Jose Ortiz would have liked to see her.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, she was a good 3-4 lengths back after maybe 100 yards. She had to swing around everyone wide all the way around the turn through the lane. So I think you can put a line through that race. She's a horse you have to decide, is she good enough? And is 5.5 really what she wants to do? Because even though she won 5.5 at Churchill, she's run okay at longer distances as well. She's the one I have the biggest question mark about 5.5 being right for her.
Yeah, I mean, she's kind of an interesting horse. I don't disagree that she's run some of her better speed figures going a little bit longer. They've tried a variety of distances with her. I think they've gone as far as 1 mile and a 16th a few times in her career. But if you just look through her victories, she's 4 for 4 at this 5.5 furlong distance, and she's 1 for 9 at every other distance. I know victories aren't everything, but she has had most of her success going as short as they have run her. So maybe she just gets more pace in these shorter races, and that's really what helps her. I thought she ran pretty well to win that Unbridled Sydney 2 back, got a pretty good trip that day. I just think her last race is not a true indication of her ability, and she is one that is a candidate to bounce back here if she gets the right kind of pace scenario. Another horse coming out of that Intercontinental is Lady Edith, and she was kind of the surprise of that race, Craig, getting into the Superfecta at odds of 35-1, despite the fact that she was making her first start off a trainer switch to Christophe Clement. Maybe she's just improved in the new barn.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm looking at her. She made her, wasn't her debut as she ran on the synthetic, but her first turf start in the new barn, and she jumped up her speed figure from a 108 last time on turf in October. So she seems to be moving in the right direction. She draws a decent post in here. It does say she was bumped at the break, but I think that was pretty inconsequential. But she's one that I think is going to offer some value in here because I think she may get overlooked again with some bigger names in the race.
I completely agree. She was 35-1 last time, but I think I have her 12-1 on the morning line today. She's got a rider, Trevor McCarthy, aboard, who typically doesn't take that much money during the Saratoga meet, so I'm not going to be surprised when she's double digits in this race, and she definitely has a performance in her that can get in the mix. The horse that I thought had the worst trip at the Intercontinental is the number 2, Miss J Mckay. She just broke from the outside post in the 11-horse field, was wide the entire way, legitimately 5 wide, all the way around the far turn. You just can't pull that kind of trip in a turf sprint and hope to be successful. She ran pretty well too back when she won that license fee. I know it was a slow pace, but she was pretty commanding, winning by over 3 lengths. If she can work out the right trip, she's one I think could be dangerous here.
Yeah, she could be. I'm a little leery of her because she really hasn't run as fast as some others in here. She hasn't really hit the 110 mark anytime recently. I think this has a race rating in Timeform US of 114. But given that she ran a 108 with that trip last time, I could certainly see her improving and getting to that mark. It's just a matter of what kind of trip she's going to get in here. It's a little tough to say. She's a horse who generally drops back, particularly in these shorter races. The one time she was up was at 6 furlongs when the pace was slower. So I definitely think she has a chance. I just wonder about her trip again.
And as you highlighted, jockey Irad Ortiz was aboard for that victory in the license fee 2 back, and he is climbing back aboard here after Joel Rosario got on last time. So that's definitely not a negative with Miss J Mckay, and I think she's interesting if she does indeed go off at a fair price in this race. Let's take a look at some horses coming out of different spots. Mark Casse has a runner in here, the number 8 Super Sensational, who's shipping in from Woodbine. We'll take a look at her last race when she was second in the Royal North. Kind of a heartbreaking defeat, Craig, because she led all the way until basically the final jump of this race when she got passed by Boardroom. But this was her first ever turf start, and she showed that she can handle it.
Yeah, she handled the turf just fine. The question I have with her is that was a grade 2 race in name only. It didn't come back very fast at all. She only got a 102 speed figure. She's a horse who seems to find ways not to win races since debuting early in her career with 2 wins on the synthetic. She's been low prices quite a few times and only managed to win one of those races. So, I'm a little bit against her. I know we're going to talk about her trainer a little bit, but she's not for me in here. I think she might get overbet based on that rating, grade 2 race she's coming out of.
Yeah, she's a little interesting because she has run some higher speed figures on the dirt. She was actually the runner up in the grade 1 test at Saratoga on the main track last year. Clearly, that turf speed figure not quite up to the standard required in this race, but it was her first start off the layoff. So maybe she's one that can take a step forward because there is ability in there. We'll just see how she stacks up against this field. But as you were alluding to, not really Mark Cassie's forte in these turf sprints at Saratoga. We'll take a look at the DRF Formulator fact. Over the past 5 years, sprinting on turf at the spa, just 3 for 54 with a 6% win rate, a 61-cent ROI. Not really the kind of stat that makes you want to give her a second look at this race, Craig.
No, and when I look through those 50, however many starts it was, 2 of the 3 wins were with maidens going the 5.5 furlongs. There's not as big a sample size when you get into these stakes horses, particularly older horses. But so I didn't want to use that one, but it's even worse if you cut those out.
Let's take a look at one more replay. The Goldwood Stakes at Monmouth Park, won by Bout Time. And this Cherie DeVoe trainee feels like one that could attract a lot of support in here, Craig, because she is all upside. She's just making the 5th start of her career in this Goldwood. She's now 3 for 4 on the turf, just a head shy of being undefeated on this surface. And her last 2 turf sprint victories have been very visually impressive.
Yeah, she's not just winning these races. She's pretty much demolishing the fields. My one issue with her, I have no real issues with her other than she hasn't run particularly fast. But the way she's doing it, I guess you could say she can improve. But when I look back through those fields, she probably should have been demolishing them. There wasn't a lot of strength in there. Robin Sparkles, who's in this field, was in her wake last time. She ran 3rd after setting the pace. But I suspect Robin Sparkles, who we're going to talk about a little more, is not really the same horse that we saw before she had that long layoff.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. About time she really did look good winning that race. I will say she got an absolutely perfect trip from that rider at Monmouth last time, saving ground on the turn, tipping out at the top of the stretch. So we'll see if Luis Saez can do as well on her. But it typically is a good sign when trainer Cherie DeVoe reaches out for Luis Saez. They've had a lot of success together. And About Time, definitely an interesting newcomer to this older turf sprint division in New York right now. And the other horse that you mentioned, that speedster, the number 6, Robin Sparkles. We'll take a look at her past performances. Craig, she's going to step on the gas early, but finishing power has been an issue for her lately.
Yeah, she's not really finishing off her races. She won that off the turf race, but there wasn't much in there. Unfortunately, some of the 5.5 furlong races at Monmouth, they don't time the fractions. They're about distances. So I don't have pace figures for there. But just the bigger concern for me is not only is she not finishing off the races, I'm not sure she's running near as fast as she was before early. We can't tell that for sure because we're missing those fractions, but I just don't think she's the same filly. She'll probably still go for the lead, and I do think it's a kind of a key to the race particularly for Caravel, just how fast she is early. So interesting horse. I don't want any parts of betting her, but I do think she's a big player.
Before we get to our top picks in this race, remember to subscribe to the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. You can get a lot of great information about this current Saratoga meet from our colleagues Dan Illman, Mike Beer, Nicole Russo, a lot of great video content focusing on Saratoga on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. Craig, let's throw up our picks for this race. We went in slightly different directions. You're going for the long shot, the number 7, Lady Edith, a big price last time, and she could get ignored once again.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. I mean, I think this race, it wouldn't surprise me if really any of the horses besides Robin Sparkles that we talked about won. So I went looking for a little more value. I think the bettors will probably ignore again, looking for some of those better connections, a bigger name rider. She's kind of the other Christophe Clement in here. So I liked how she ran last time, and I think she's going to get a nice trip and be right there at the finish.
Yeah, I'm also taking a slight stance against the favorites, not going for as big a price as Craig, though. I went for the number 2, Miss J Mckay. Just thought she was the one that had the toughest trip last time in the Intercontinental. I like the visual of her win 2 back, and she's getting that jockey switch back to Irad Ortiz, so hopefully she can work out a trip from the inside. Both Craig and I are taking a bit of a stance against the 2 favorites, Caravel and Bout Time, in the Caress Stakes on Saturday at Saratoga. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.